This presentation is meant to go over 6 rhetorical strategies that Robert Cialdini and Steve Martin from the Science of Persuasion go over in their video, which is linked on this slide. And those 6 rhetorical strategies are reciprocity, scarcity, authority, consistency, liking, and consensus. And I'm going to go over each one of those one at a time per slide. Of course, there are an infinite number of rhetorical strategies and ways that we can get people to say yes to what we want and what we need. This is just 6 of them. So first up is reciprocity, which is the idea that if I do something for you, you're more likely to do something for me. An example of reciprocity in my classroom would be that I try to treat my students as equals. I try to have candy for them on a daily basis. I try to have a welcoming atmosphere in my room, and I try to respect them like the adults that they are. And I expect, or I hope at least, that they will reciprocate and they will enjoy my class as much as possible, and also that they will do their best to learn as much as possible. I think a very typical example of reciprocity is when we're at a restaurant and we have a waiter or a waitress, and that waiter or waitress is particularly good and is nice to us and offers us excellent service. We then might reciprocate with a tip that is above the normal percentage of 18 or 19 or 20%. We might go above that. We reciprocate their service with a monetary reward. The next rhetorical strategy that the video Science of Persuasion goes over is scarcity, which of course is when we don't have enough of something that we need, or we don't have as much of it as we might like. And I think this is a very complex rhetorical strategy. It's easy to understand, but how do we use scarcity to persuade people to do what we want? And I think maybe a good, but again, still, I think nuanced example of scarcity would be a high school football game. A high school football game lasts 48 minutes, and you have 11 people, 11 boys on the defensive side of the ball, and you have 11 boys on the offensive side of the ball. At the high school that I teach at, Lowell High School in Indiana, we currently have about 60 students on our football team. So you can quickly do the math and see that if only 22 of them are going to play, and of course there are substitutions, right? But it's impossible for all 60 of them to get an equal amount of playing time. Plus, there's a limited number of positions, there's a scarcity of positions, but then there's also a scarcity of time. And so what this scarcity, I think, might do, or at least in the hopes of coaches, what it might do, is cause players to work hard during practice, to cause players to work hard in the off season, to attend camps that might make them better players, to increase their chances of getting playing time. And, technically, I know that this would never happen, but technically there's no reason why a high school football game has to start at 7 o'clock on a Friday night. It could just as easily start at 10 a.m. on a Saturday, and there could be a double header. And I know that would never happen, but you could play a high school football game at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday for a couple hours, and then come back and play another high school football game, the same teams, at 1 o'clock on the same exact day. And maybe there's a rule for injury purposes, for health purposes, that a student could only play 4 quarters. But that would decrease, right, the scarcity, at least in terms of time. And also, I guess, in terms of positions, because now you would have 44 instead of 22 if you were keeping tabs of quarters that students could play. And at least theoretically, that might cause students to let up during practice, not work as hard during practice, because they know that there is more playing time waiting for them. The third rhetorical strategy that the Science of Persuasion goes over is authority. And this is probably an easier one to understand and also to apply. But we tend to listen to people when we think that they are authorities, when we think that they are experts in the area that they're talking about. So here we have lots of different professionals and authority figures. And just as I would not want my doctor to necessarily make me my dinner in a fancy restaurant, I don't want my chef to perform surgery on me if I need it in a hospital, and so on and so forth. I'm a teacher of English, and I don't think that any of my students should really listen to me about any other subject. If they came in and I started talking about calculus or physics or biology or anything else, pretty much, they should probably stop listening because I don't know what I'm talking about. But hopefully, they see me as somewhat of an authority when it comes to literature and language and things that are related to the language arts. The fourth rhetorical strategy that the science of persuasion discusses is consistency. So, consistency, of course, creates confidence, right? Similarities create confidence, repetition creates trust. So, when we have the same behavior and the same outcomes happen again and again and again and again, we can trust them. And that can motivate us to behave in certain ways. When we are inconsistent, when we find inconsistencies, then we have a lack of confidence and a lack of trust, and then we won't do whatever it is the person is asking us to do. Consistency. The fifth rhetorical strategy that the science of persuasion discusses is liking. And this is, pretty simple, but I think, again, that it does have a nuance to it if we stop and think about it. If we like someone, we're more willing to listen to that person. But unlike authority, where you might only listen to someone in terms of authority on what they are an expert in, when we like someone, we might be more willing to listen to them on something that we ourselves don't know anything about. So let me give you an example. I don't know much about economics. It fascinates me. I enjoy learning about economics, but I find it to be a confusing subject. I do think, however, that I know a little bit about politics. I was in law school. I took some political science courses in college. I don't have a degree in it, but I know a little bit about political science. And my politics line up pretty well with a very famous Nobel-winning economist named Paul Krugman, who is still alive. And because my politics line up with Paul Krugman, and I can trust him, right? Because I'm consistent with something that I do know about with Paul Krugman, I like him. And because I like him, I'm willing to listen to him on something I don't know about, which is economics. When Paul Krugman has an opinion about economics, I am in no position to evaluate his opinion, but I tend to believe him because I like him in another area where I am in a position to evaluate. So there is a nuance to liking that maybe sometimes we don't think about. The sixth and final rhetorical strategy that the science of persuasion discusses is consensus. And that is the idea that if we can have consensus, if everybody is in agreement, then the rhetorical strategy has the effect of moving everybody in the same direction. An example of consensus would be that if, again, going back to my classroom, if I give everybody Jolly Ranchers as they're coming through the door, and everybody in the room likes Jolly Ranchers and enjoys Jolly Ranchers, then the consensus might be, hey, we're going to give Giannotti a break today and listen to him and see what he has to say about language arts and about AP English language. So consensus can sort of, I think, encompass other rhetorical strategies like reciprocity, like authority, like consistency, and create movement toward the same goal. And on my last slide, I just want to reiterate what the 6 rhetorical strategies are that we've discussed in this video, and I see already that I have misspelled consistency, and that's bad, but I'm not going to go back and change this video, so it will just have to live like that for all of eternity. But we had reciprocity, scarcity, authority, consistency with a T, liking, and consensus. I hope that this video helps make sense of the Science of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini and Steve Martin.